Snow whips across a black plateau in occupied Norway. 6 men glide silently through the storm, their skis cutting over ice older than memory. They carry no flags, no uniforms, only rifles, plastic explosives, and orders from London that say one thing: stop Hitler from getting the atomic bomb. Their leader, Joachim Rønneberg, is 23. Behind him, 5 countrymen, Knut Haukelid, Fredrik Kaiser, Kasper Idland, Birger Strømsheim, and Arne Kjelstrup, all trained by Britain's Special Operations Executive, move in single file. If they fail, the Nazis may build the most destructive weapon in history. If they succeed, no one outside these mountains will ever know their names. Below them, the lights of the Vemork hydroelectric plant glow like a fortress in the snow. Floodlights sweep across barbed wire, guard towers, and a bridge spanning a frozen gorge. Inside, German scientists are producing heavy water, deuterium oxide, the secret ingredient in Hitler's nuclear reactor project. Without it, his atomic dream dies, and tonight 6 men plan to kill it. 3 years earlier, Norway fell to the Wehrmacht in April 1940. The Germans seized the Vemork plant, owned by Norsk Hydro, because it was the only industrial facility on Earth producing heavy water in quantity. When Allied intelligence learned that physicist Werner Heisenberg was using it for nuclear research, alarm bells rang in London. British scientists warned, if the Nazis build a reactor first, they can build a bomb. One weapon could erase an entire city. The British tried to stop it once before. In November 1942, 2 gliders filled with Royal Engineers were sent to destroy Vemork in Operation Freshman. Both crashed in the mountains. The survivors were captured, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo under Hitler's commando order. Every man was killed. Now, 4 months later, this new mission, Operation Gunnerside, is the second attempt, the last. Rønneberg and his team parachuted into Norway on February 16, 1943, after months of training in sabotage and survival. They landed miles off course in -30-degree winds, then skied through blizzards to join the advance team already in hiding near Rjukan. The journey took a week. Their rations froze solid, their clothes stiffened into armor. By the time they reached the safe house, their faces were burned raw from cold. For 2 weeks they studied the factory and memorized every guard's path. The front bridge was suicide. The gorge below, 600 feet deep, lined with ice, was their only chance. They would cross it unseen, climb the cliff under the turbines, slip inside through a maintenance tunnel, plant the explosives, and vanish before the Germans even knew they were there. On the night of February 27th, the storm lifted. Moonlight spilled over the valley. The saboteurs strapped on skis and set out. The snow was crusted and hard, perfect for silence. They moved quickly, breath clouding in the dark. Rønneberg led, compass in hand, heart hammering. The sound of water roared far below. They reached the gorge after midnight. The ice groaned under their boots as they crossed the frozen Mona River. One misstep, and they'd vanish into the black current. Above them, the factory windows blazed with electric light. The smell of oil drifted down through the cold. They cut through a fence and found the narrow cable tunnel leading into the basement. Rønneberg went first, then Kaiser, carrying the explosives, 20 pounds of plastic charges with British-made detonators. Inside, the sound of the turbines filled the air, a deep, metallic heartbeat of the Nazi atomic program. At 12:45 a.m. they reached the heavy water room, rows of steel cells connected by pipes and gauges. Rønneberg set his watch. They had 30 minutes. The men worked silently, fitting the charges to the central tanks. Each fuse was cut to length, each detonator checked twice. Haukelid scrawled compliments of the king on one of the charges. When everything was ready, Rønneberg looked around the dark room. The humming machinery, the glass flasks filled with the liquid that could have powered an atomic bomb, and whispered, "Let's go." They slipped out the same way they'd come. Behind them, the first explosion rolled through the mountain. Lights flickered across the valley as alarms blared. By the time German guards reached the basement, the saboteurs were already gone, swallowed by the snow, gliding back into the white silence of the plateau. They had just destroyed the heart of Hitler's atomic project. Before the world called him a hero, Joachim Rønneberg was a quiet student from the coastal town of Ålesund, Norway. He was born on August 30, 1919, the son of a shopkeeper and a schoolteacher, raised among fjords and fishing boats. His family taught him discipline, self-reliance, and silence, skills that would one day save his life. He loved the sea, the mountains, and the precision of tools. But when the Germans invaded Norway on April 9, 1940, all that quiet precision turned into defiance. He was 20. German troops landed in Oslo, Trondheim, Bergen, and Narvik within hours. The Norwegian army fought back fiercely but was outmatched. The king fled to Britain. The government fell. Within 2 months, Norway was occupied. The Nazis raised the swastika over every harbour and schoolhouse. The resistance was born the same week. Joachim refused to serve under German command. He joined the underground network that smuggled people, radios and weapons along the coast. The Gestapo quickly put informers in every town and arrests followed. Realizing he'd soon be caught, Rønneberg made a choice few ever came back from: escape to Britain. In March 1941, disguised as a fisherman, he slipped aboard a small boat crossing the North Sea in darkness, part of the Shetland bus network ferrying refugees and agents to Scotland. The crossing was brutal, waves like cliffs, freezing spray, and German patrols prowling the coast. When he staggered ashore near Aberdeen after 4 days at sea, he weighed less than 60 kilograms and had frostbitten hands. But he was free. That same year, British intelligence created the Special Operations Executive, SOE, Churchill's secret army of saboteurs whose job was, as Churchill said, to set Europe ablaze. The SOE trained ordinary men to do extraordinary things: blow up railways, cut communication lines, assassinate officers, and vanish into the night. Rønneberg was one of the first Norwegians recruited. The instructors in the Scottish Highlands quickly realized they'd found something rare. Calm under pressure, meticulous with explosives, fluent in English, and utterly without ego. He never panicked, one instructor later wrote. He just calculated. Training at Inverness and Drumnadrocheat was brutal. Recruits learned demolition, parachuting, silent killing, Morse code, and survival in the Arctic. They practiced with Nobel 808 plastic explosive, the same material later used at Vemork. Rønneberg proved a natural leader, not loud, but decisive. When others hesitated, he acted. At the same time in Berlin, scientists of the German Uranverein, the uranium club, were trying to build a nuclear reactor. Under physicist Werner Heisenberg, they needed a moderator to slow down neutrons in the chain reaction. Heavy water, deuterium oxide, was perfect. The problem was supply. Only the Vemork plant in Norway, owned by Norsk Hydro, produced enough. By late 1941, the Germans had seized it. Shipments of heavy water began leaving Rjukan by rail, then by ferry across Lake Tinnsjø, then to Germany. British intelligence intercepted the reports. By 1942, Allied physicists warned that Germany might soon produce a critical mass of uranium. The War Cabinet decided the heavy water plant must be destroyed at any cost. Rønneberg was summoned to London in October 1942. The SOE's Norwegian section briefed him on the failed glider mission, Operation Freshman, that had ended in massacre. The new plan needed men who could move like shadows and think like engineers. Rønneberg listened quietly, then said only, "If it can be done, we'll do it." He was given command of the new operation, codenamed Gunnerside, after the estate in Yorkshire where they trained. The name meant nothing. The success would mean everything. His team was carefully chosen. Frederick Kaiser, demolitions expert, 24. Casper Eidland, veteran of the Norwegian campaign, skilled marksman. Birger Strømsheim, engineer, methodical, calm. Arne Kjelstrup, explosives specialist, older and experienced. Knut Haukelid, master of sabotage and escape, later famed for sinking the ferry Hydro. The mission plan was simple on paper and nearly suicidal in reality. They would parachute into Norway, find the advance team, the Grouse Group, that had been stranded since October, and together infiltrate the plant, all without being seen, captured, or triggering an avalanche. For months, they trained in Britain's coldest mountains. They practiced assembling explosives in darkness, memorizing the feel of every wire and pin. Rønneberg studied blueprints of Vemork and its access tunnels. He learned that the Germans had added new guards and floodlights after the last attack. The odds were now worse than ever. Before departure, the SOE's chief of Norwegian operations, Colonel John Skinner Wilson, pulled him aside. "You may not come back," he said plainly. "If you fail, the Germans will strengthen every facility in Europe." Rønneberg nodded. "Then we won't fail." On February 16, 1943, 6 parachutes opened over Telemark County. The wind was fierce. One man nearly drifted into a mountain. They landed in waist-deep snow, gathered their gear, and disappeared into the forest before sunrise. Each carried enough explosives to destroy the plant, or themselves if captured. For 6 days they skied through blizzards toward the rendezvous. They slept under rocks, melted snow for water, and rationed food down to crumbs. When they finally reached the grouse cabin on February 22nd, the older team, thin, starving, and living on moss broth, burst into tears. They'd been waiting 4 months for rescue. That night, as the wind screamed outside, Rønneberg unrolled the blueprints by candlelight. He tapped the center of the factory map, the basement room holding the electrolysis cells. "This," he said quietly, "is where Hitler's bomb begins." The room fell silent. They all knew what it meant. If they failed, Germany might win the war with a single weapon. And if they succeeded, no one would ever know their names. Only that the Nazis never got the bomb. Rønneberg folded the map, blew out the candle, and whispered, "Tomorrow, we move." They meet in the dark like conspirators in an old myth, 2 teams who must become one. The advance team, Grouse, has been hiding on the Hardanger Vidda since October 1942. Thin, frostbitten, living off moss and ox broth, they know the mountain routes, the guard rotations, the weak points in the floodlight arcs. The new arrivals, 6 from Gunnerside, drop in the storm on 16th of February 1943, stumble through waist-high snow, and find the cabin where the others are sheltering. For a week they merge blueprints and maps, time their watches to the factory clock, and whisper the route until each man has it burned into his muscles. The plan is surgical and improbable. The front approach is impossible. The bridge across the Rjukan Gorge is watched night and day. Freshman's failure last November, 2 gliders that crashed, and men executed under Hitler's commando order, proved the obvious: heavy bombers and frontal assaults will not work. The only entrance the Norwegians can exploit is the seldom-used cable tunnel at the plant's rear, reachable only by descending the frozen ravine below the turbines and climbing the service slope directly under the concrete work. If they can get inside and destroy the electrolysis cells that concentrate deuterium oxide, they will cripple Germany's supply of heavy water. They train in absolute silence. Rønneberg practices the timing of detonators until his thumbs go numb. Kaiser and Kjelstrup test charges in snowdrifts, learning how much delay will let them be gone before the blast wakes the valley. They practice slipping over ice and moving with ski poles like quiet hands. They carve a message into a stick, If we die, tell our wives we tried, and hide it in the sled, because the war is always personal beneath the politics. The men who will fight here are not reckless thrill-seekers. They are engineers, hunters, and fishermen turned saboteurs, precise, calm, and terrifyingly determined. On the night of 27-28 February 1943, the weather closes in, then clears. At 23:30, they strap on skis and move like a single animal over a frozen skin of snow. The group splits once, 5 to attack, the rest to provide cover and misdirection. They descend into the Mona River gorge with ropes and crampons, the river roaring invisible under the ice. At the bottom, the air tastes of rust and turbine oil. One misstep now and the fall is final. They cross the river, shoulder their packs, and begin the ascent up the cliff under the humming generators. Each man is a calculation of risk and courage. They reach the rear maintenance entrance, a narrow tunnel used for cables and service work. It is guarded by a single Norwegian caretaker, a quiet man whom the team finds in the plant basement, a detail the planners had hoped for. He is named Johansson, and he will later insist the saboteurs saved his glasses so he could keep working. They move through the tunnel on their stomachs, the air thick with the metallic scent of machinery and the low throb of turbines, the heartbeat of the heavy water operation. Kaiser, the demolitions expert, lays charges on the electrolysis cells, precisely placed plastic explosives and timed fuses designed to shatter column arrays rather than set the building's concrete ablaze. Before they light the fuses as proof of Allied involvement and to forestall reprisals on the locals, they leave an English Thompson submachine gun in plain view, a signature to show this was British-directed sabotage, not random resistance violence. They set the fuses and melt into the night. Rønneberg is the last man out. He looks back at the row of steel cells, at the glass flasks, at the tiny concentrated pool of heavy water that could mean death for millions if used in the wrong hands. He thinks of London, of physicists who warned of what a reactor could do, and of the quiet weight of responsibility that has been given to 6 cold men on skis. He slips from the tunnel and follows the others into the dark. 40 minutes later, the bombs go off, targeted, controlled, ripping out the electrolysis chambers and collapsing pipes and valves, but leaving the massive concrete exterior relatively intact. The explosions blow out a chunk of the plant's operational heart and destroy the inventory of heavy water on hand. For a few breathless minutes, nothing is known. Lights flicker through the valley, German sentries run to the bridge, guns mount and alarms howl. The official German response will later say they believe an internal accident triggered mines. In the chaos, the saboteurs gain minutes they did not ask for, but need desperately. They ski away in single file across the plateau as the first German search parties comb the ravine. Over the next days, an enormous hunt mounts. Patrols, dogs, and thousands of soldiers flood the area desperate to capture the men who have humiliated the Wehrmacht and possibly halted a weapons development. The escape becomes its own epic. 5 of the saboteurs, Rønneberg, Haukelid, Kjelstrup, Stremsheim, and Idland, slip south and then east, covering hundreds of kilometers on nearly half-starved legs. They cross glaciers, sleep in sheepfolds, and trade their skis for the thin safety of Swedish neutrality. The route to Sweden is not a single path, but a gauntlet of patrols and avalanches. It will take them 2 weeks of hard travel to reach neutral ground. 2 others, Kaiser and Hans Storhaug, part of the larger team, head toward Oslo to continue resistance work. In all, the raid is surgical in effect and miraculous in escape. The men not only break the plant's production, but survive to fight another day. The immediate effect is brutal and practical. The heavy water production is knocked out for months. The Germans try to repair the plant, but each attempt costs time they can scarcely afford. The Allies later mount bombing raids on Vemork in November 1943, And in February 1944, the Norwegian resistance sinks the ferry SF Hydro as the Germans attempt to ship remaining heavy water to Germany, an act that costs civilian lives but keeps the larger weapon from reaching its destination. The Gunnerside raid thus becomes a front-line act of strategic denial. A small group denies a global power access to an ingredient it desperately needs. In the days after the blast, the men sit on a ridge at dawn and watch the valley wake. Rønneberg remembers the sky as a mackerel sky, and the silence settling over them like a benediction. They are exhausted, frost-bitten, and elated. For the first time in years, they have handed the enemy a wound that might change the war itself. They also know the cost was near. Operation Freshman's failure is a fresh warning, and German reprisals may be brutal. Still, for the moment, the mountain keeps their secret. The factory's heart lies in ruin. The heavy water inventory is gone, and for months at least the Nazi project is stalled. The snow has stopped. The world is pure, lightless white, the air so cold it feels like glass. Below them, the Vemork plant glows like a ship in a dark sea. Windows blazing, chimneys steaming. 6 men lie flat in the snow, breath freezing on their scarves, watching the fortress that holds the key to Hitler's atomic dream. It is February 27, 1943, just before midnight. The final approach has begun. Rønneberg checks his watch, 23:45. He touches the small detonator case inside his pack, 30 pounds of plastic explosive, enough to rip through the electrolysis cells but not collapse the whole plant. Precision, not spectacle, he reminds himself. The point is to destroy the heart of the heavy water system and leave everything else standing, so the Germans waste months trying to understand what failed. He signals. The men move. They descend the gorge silently, one behind another, skis slung across their backs. The slope is slick with ice. They dig crampons into the rock and inch downward. Below them, the Mona River glints under the moon, half frozen, half roaring black. Every few seconds, chunks of ice break away and thunder downstream. One false step, one scrape of metal, and German sentries will open fire from above. At the base, the cold feels alive, pressing on their skin like a weight. The only sound is the hum of turbines and the distant clang of machinery. The plant's floodlights sweep the opposite bank, but the ravine hides them in shadow. The crossing is the worst part. They crawl over the river's ice crust, gripping ropes stretched across boulders slick with frost. In the darkness, a crack echoes. One man's boot breaks through, but the ice holds. They reach the far side, gasping in silence, then begin the climb. It takes an hour to crawl up the cliff under the plant's foundations. Their fingers are raw, their packs dig into their shoulders. When they reach the top, Rønneberg sees what they came for: a narrow maintenance track, a locked gate, and a small side building that leads into the basement cable tunnel. A dog barks from somewhere above. The sound stops. The guard doesn't come. Kjelstrup cuts through the fence with wire snips. They slip inside the tunnel, a low passage smelling of oil and ozone. Their boots make no sound. The hum of generators vibrates through the walls. Pipes drip condensation. The temperature rises with every step. At the end of the tunnel, they find the door to the heavy water room. Inside, 12 great electrolysis cells, steel cylinders connected by pipes and valves, the beating heart of the German deuterium project. The air is warm, heavy with chemical vapor. 2 Norwegian workmen are on the night shift. The saboteurs corner them quietly. One, Johansson, recognizes the dialect. These are his countrymen. They promise not to harm him. "Stay calm," Kaiser whispers. "You'll live." Johansson nods. Then the team begins its work. Kaiser and Eidland unpack the explosives. Strömsheim times the fuses. 30 seconds, no more. Haukelid checks the door and windows. Rønneberg lays the charges directly on the electrolysis cells, fastening them with felt strips to mute the blast's echo. Each device is set to detonate sequentially to maximize damage without blowing the entire basement skyward. Every move has been rehearsed in the Scottish Highlands. Every wire, every fuse, every cut. But rehearsals don't smell like fear. Rønneberg looks at his watch again. 0:41, 2 minutes, he whispers. They withdraw down the tunnel. Kaiser pulls the main fuse cord taut and tucks it beneath a pipe. Orkelid leaves a British Sten gun by the door, a deliberate clue that this is an Allied strike, not a random act by Norwegian workers. They're halfway out when the first explosion thunders through the mountain. The floor jumps, dust rains from the ceiling. A deep metallic roar follows, steel rupturing, pipes bursting, steam venting like cannon fire. Then, for a moment, the mountain goes still. It worked. The men run. Up the slope, through the fence, across the river ice, retracing their path as the alarm sirens start to wail. Searchlights slice the gorge, sweeping the cliffs, but the snow hides everything. They climb the far bank and vanish into the plateau just as the second blast rumbles behind them. By 01:30, German soldiers are flooding the plant, shouting orders, searching rooms, and finding only twisted metal and flooding water. The electrolysis chamber is gone, every cell ruptured, the heavy water lost, but the rest of the plant stands. From a distance it looks untouched, still humming with light. That deception will buy the saboteurs time. The Norwegians ski through the night, covering 30 kilometers before dawn. The temperature drops below -30. Their breath freezes into ice masks, their clothes are crusted stiff. They don't speak, not from discipline, but because their throats are raw from the cold. Behind them, chaos. German engineers arrive from Oslo inspecting the wreckage. They find British detonator fragments, a Sten gun, and a note scrawled on the wall. Komplimenter fra kongen. Compliments of the king. Berlin is furious, orders fly, every road is searched, every cabin burned, every set of ski tracks followed. But the saboteurs split up, half disappear toward Oslo, the rest head for Sweden. For weeks German patrols sweep the Hardanger Vida. Not one man is caught. At dawn on March 1st, Rønneberg looks back from the plateau. Smoke rises faintly from Vemork, a dark ribbon against the snow. His mission report will later call it a simple operation. But he knows better. He has just struck the most important industrial target in Europe and lived. Within hours, the heavy water supply that Germany's physicists depended on is gone. Heisenberg's reactor experiments stall. Months of production are lost. The Nazi nuclear dream begins to die in that frozen gorge. The 6 saboteurs ski toward Sweden, exhausted but alive. They eat frozen biscuits, melt snow for water, and sleep under reindeer hides. When they finally cross into neutral territory, frostbitten and skeletal, a British officer meets them with a single question.
"Did you succeed?"
Rønneberg nods once. "Yes," he says. "The factory is finished." He never mentions the men who didn't come back. The glider troops from Operation Freshman, the executed prisoners, the nameless helpers who hid them in barns. But he remembers them all. The British later call it the most successful act of sabotage in World War II. The Germans never rebuild their heavy water capacity, and the world, unknowingly, steps back from the edge of atomic terror. By dawn, the snow has already begun to cover their tracks. The men of Operation Gunnerside vanish into the white wilderness, leaving behind a crippled plant and a mystery that will baffle the German command for weeks. In Oslo, Nazi security chief Josef Terboven rages. He orders hundreds of arrests across Telemark but finds nothing. The saboteurs have dissolved back into the mountains. The Gestapo interrogates local workers, threatens executions, and tightens patrols around Vemork. Even then, the truth cannot be hidden. The plant's heart is gone. Heavy water production has collapsed. In Berlin, the report reaches physicist Werner Heisenberg. He understands instantly what it means. Without deuterium oxide, the uranium club's reactor experiments are dead. In London, the news reaches the War Cabinet. Churchill reads it twice and smiles. The only Allied sabotage operation of the war to hit its target perfectly, on time, without casualties. Rønneberg and his men reach neutral Sweden after 2 weeks of brutal skiing. Frostbitten, half-starved, they are flown to Britain and debriefed by the Special Operations Executive. The operation's total cost: 0 Allied lives, 0 prisoners lost, complete destruction of the enemy's critical material. The SOE files the report under one line: mission accomplished in every detail. But the Germans try again. They repair Vemork and restart production in late 1943. The Allies respond with air raids. 200 bombers flatten much of the facility that November. Yet the Nazis salvage what remains and prepare to move the last stock of heavy water to Germany by ferry. On February 20, 1944, Outwitted, the only Gunnerside member still in Norway, intercepts the shipment. In a last act of sabotage, he plants explosives aboard the ferry SF Hydro as it crosses Lake Tingsjø. The blast sends the cargo and 18 civilians to the bottom. It is a tragic decision, but it ends the heavy water program forever. When the war ends in May 1945, investigators confirm what the saboteurs suspected. Germany's nuclear project never came close to a bomb. The loss of Vemork's heavy water supply delayed experiments beyond recovery. Heisenberg himself later admitted, "If they had not destroyed the plant, we might have succeeded in creating a chain reaction." Rønneberg returns to a free Norway a hero, though he never calls himself one. At 26, he looks older, eyes lined by years of cold and silence. He resumes civilian life, joins NRK broadcasting, and rarely speaks of what he did. When he finally does, decades later, he insists the mission belonged to all who fought in resistance. Ordinary men asked to do an extraordinary job. His comrades scatter into quiet lives. Some emigrate, others join post-war reconstruction. They meet occasionally in Telemark, walking the same plateau where they once skied through death. In 1948, Hollywood dramatizes the raid in Operation Swallow. In 1965, Kirk Douglas plays a version of him in The Heroes of Telemark. Rønneberg never watches either film. "Too much fiction," he says. "The real story needed no embellishment. Time turns the saboteurs into legend, but the moral weight of their mission never fades. They proved that 6 men on skis, armed only with explosives, maps, and conviction, could alter the course of a global war. Theirs was not only an act of sabotage, it was a warning of what science without conscience could create." Joachim Rønneberg lived to see the atomic age he had helped prevent from beginning under a swastika. When he died in 2018, aged 99, Norway buried him with military honours. On his coffin lay a single pair of skis and a British SOE beret, symbols of the night he changed history. In the end, the heavy water raid was more than a mission. It was a line drawn in snow between the world that was and the one that might have been.